And this tutorial is on intonation. Now that you're putting your fingers down, it's time to talk about intonation. It really is probably the most discussed topic in string playing because it's one of the most relevant topics. We don't have keys, we don't have frets. So we have to always be aware of our intonation. Intonation is playing in tune. If you have good intonation, you play well in tune. If you have bad intonation, you don't play in tune or sing in tune. Now, as a species, we are very attuned to hearing intonation in voice. I think all of us can hear when someone is singing in tune or when someone is singing out of tune. And that's because that's what we're used to. We're used to hearing vocal timbre. We've heard it our whole lives. So it's more difficult to hear intonation in other instruments that you haven't grown up with. So it's just a matter of acclimating yourself to the timbre of that instrument, listening critically, and then you start to develop that very fine-tuned skill of hearing intonation. So the key word is critical listening. I have students who are very talented, they're very musical, they certainly can hear intonation, yet they have a difficult time hearing themselves, listening to themselves, being aware of intonation as they're playing. They're very focused on other things. So it's good intonation is more easily achieved when you take that time to really practice listening carefully. So that's good intonation. Now, we do recommend that you start with tapes on your fingerboard. That just helps you to set your hand, get used to the left hand placement and the general ballpark of where those notes are. The tapes are by no means an accurate guide, so I do want you to really know that. So there are times, don't completely trust that just because it looks like your finger is going on the right tape, that you're on the right note. You'll be in the general area of that note, but everyone's finger is different. Sometimes just the width of the finger is different, can cause the finger to either be a little too high or a little too low, or just the perspective of playing can make it look like you're right on the tape and it's not, and the tapes will shift and they may not even be put down in the exact right place in the first place. So just know that those tapes are there just as general guidelines. So how do we learn to hear? How do we learn to play in tune? As time goes by, you will develop muscle memory. After repetitions of putting the finger down in the right place, your hand will build in the feel, a general muscle memory. But we are always still completely engaged in hearing intonation. So there are two ways we tune. One is, and I call harmonic or vertical intonation, and that is when we're playing a note, we're tuning notes that are sounding at the same time. And then linear or melodic intonation is when we compare notes as they occur in a linear fashion. And I'm saying vertical and linear as it's represented in music. So for instance, let's tune an interval, and we're going to start with octaves. We're going to start with octave tuning. They're easy to find, they're ringtones. It's relatively easy to play on two strings at the same time when you're only fingering on one string. So let's find our octaves. And so this is an example of harmonic tuning. So we're going to be tuning two notes at the same time. And we're going to start with the D, open D, and the third finger on the A string. So we're going to work on getting those to sound the same. So what I want you to think about is not so much, well, is my note, is it too high, is it too low, is it in tune, but just to listen for a blended sound. I want you to develop the sensitivity of hearing and feeling when these two sounds are blended. And when I mean blended, it will start to sound like one sound. Two notes, when they're really perfectly in tune, especially if they're the same pitch, will start to sound like one sound source. You lose the sense of two separate pitches, and it will blend into what will sound like one sound source, one pitch. So that's what we want to listen for, is to develop this blending sensitivity. So play your open D and your third finger D. And I want you just to wiggle your finger around just a little bit so you can hear what the unblended sound sounds like, and then you can hear what happens when it is blended. So there's a very acute harshness to an octave that's not in tune. And I'm going to slowly move my finger, and I want to also give you this tip. That when you're out of tune, chances are you're not far out of tune. And I have a lot of students who try to, when they adjust their intonation, they move their finger too much. And they really only need to be moving it just by little micro degrees. So move it slowly and by micro degrees until you can hear the right pitch. So when it's absolutely the same, that top pitch starts to recede and it starts to just sound like one pitch. I'll go the other way. So experiment with that, and remember, just moving in slight degrees, and you don't worry whether or not you know if that finger is too high or that finger is too low. There are times when I'm listening to a student tuning or playing in the context of a quartet or something, and I might not even know if my note was a little high or a little low. I know that it was wrong and can retune. Or and sometimes when you're tuning your open strings together, you may not exactly know whether it's too high or too low, but just turn the fine tuner in a direction. It will either improve or not improve. And then that's all you need to know is it getting better, and when is it right? Okay, so that is vertical tuning. Linear tuning is when we compare notes, but we do it linearly, melodically, so just one after the other. This is a little more difficult because the note that you're comparing has just stopped playing. So you have to remember what it sounded like. So to do that exercise, then we'll do the same octave, but separate notes. So I'll play it out of tune. And then when you get it to what you think is correct, then play it together. And then that will be the final check. So work on both types, vertical and linear tuning. And then obviously we can do that with other intervals, and in the other videos we'll get into that. So basic overview of intonation. It's never too early to start really listening critically. Best to just spend a portion of your practice just doing that. That way it takes a little bit of the stress off when you're practicing left-hand things or right-hand things, and you can focus just on those things and let your mind relax about intonation. But then you don't have to feel guilty about that because you're going to spend those 10 minutes really listening to your intonation.